believe I'm live. Well, I guess we'll find out. Uh, so I am back in my hotel from my journey to the courthouse. Fucking tired. So I don't know how many of you people listen to it live remotely. Still a little annoyed that the judge added that option after I started traveling to Vegas. So I could have stayed home and listened to it, but I guess it's there's some good things about being live. You can read the body language, see some of the evidence, things like that. Notice the new rolls on the back of Dana White's head, his scalp. I don't know where the hell those came from, but they're there now. So got to see that. Uh, and so let's go through some of the stuff. I've just also just got done grabbing a drink with Josh Gross. Got to tell there's a huge media contingency at the hearing today. Being huge, meaning me and Josh Gross were the two people in attendance live. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's a bunch of other media people. I think 16 people. Well, I guess only 15 because I was one of them. 16 people applied, or 15 other people applied to listen to this remotely today's hearing. So I'm sure there was a bunch of coverage on social media. But just me and Josh in the audience area, the spectators. Besides us, there were three fighters, the plaintiffs. Nate Corey from Lee v. Zuffa was in attendance. Misha Serkinov from Serkinov v. Zuffa was in attendance. And CB Dalloway, who is the not named, he's in the part of the Johnson v. Zuffa case. It's the full name is Johnson, Dalloway, and Tristan, or Connolly, I should say, v. Zuffa. So they were present. I think a couple people wandered over from other trials just to check out what was going on. So we had some just, I don't know, some people there that did not look like they belonged. But that was the spectators, basically. The rest were attorneys. So not the heavy attendance I thought. I thought, it's free content. I thought for sure some of the Vegas media members would show up. But again, you know what? I overestimate the media of our business uh, because they didn't show up again. So that they weren't there. Who was there though was a shitload of attorneys. Both sides had about a dozen attorneys. So if you look at the hourly rate they charge, which was posted on the previous case, this might have been. Let me just calculate really quick. I am guessing this was at least $20,000 to $25,000 an hour hearing happened today with the attorney fees. So we are talking possibly when you add in the prep hours and all that stuff, not prep, I shouldn't say, just the hours today that they could bill. There might have been $250,000 of billable hours going in today from today's hearing because each side had about a dozen attorneys there. I, of course, did not get any of those billable hours. So I have, and I probably lost out. Me and Stephanie probably lost out on subscriptions because they offered it to the remote access. So other people providing the content for free. So I lost out on that, but who's complaining, right? Besides me. So anyways, it was interesting though. There was a lot of interesting stuff that happened. I mean, it's boring to listen to. You got to kind of pick out the interesting stuff after the fact because a lot of tiresome questions, but let's go through some of them, what happened today. I do not know if you guys can send me messages or not. I'm not very good at working this live feed. So if it's not sounding good, let me know. If you have any questions, I guess try to post them and hopefully I will see them. But I'm not certain I will. I see people logging on though. So we have 20 people logged on right now. So more are logging on. So maybe I should wait, but fuck it, I'm tired, so I'm going to start. So if you guys the first people here get to hear all the stuff, the people coming late, well, too bad. That's good. I can see, I guess, notes and messages, so that's good. Let me get on my old man reading glasses so I can read them better. Also, I was going through the Mayweather complaint I saw. Holy shit, that is. I just, rough analysis. I'm not a lawyer, as I will. I'm always trying to make clear. But I see some pretty big loopholes so far. At least looks like loopholes in this Mayweather complaint. So I would, yeah, I think Mayweather might have to tighten up a few things. I'm not certain. What's interesting to note about the Mayweather complaint, even though he said that they owe him 340 million that they didn't pay him, he does make the claim that he earned 1.2 billion. So that means 760 million or 860 million he would have received. Uh, but he doesn't name Al Heyman, the person he claims ripped him off. Instead, he claims that he's suing Showtime and Espinoza for aiding and abetting. And I don't even know if you can really make that complaint. So I will read this with a fine comb. Me and Stephanie will talk about it later, but let's get back to the hearing. So, first person they called today was Dana White. Yeah, there's 3 Erics here. Look at that, the fucking gang of Erics. I might have to ban some of you guys Erics. We have too many Erics. Confuses the fuck out of me. So today's hearing, the first person they called was Dana White. And, Dana White, the person, the key figure in the UFC, the guy that runs everything, that knows everything, the smartest guy in the business, apparently doesn't run anything according to his testimony today. According to him, when asked, because if you're not familiar, we'll go over really quick. Today's hearing was about the spoilage issue. That there was a large number of documents that the UFC, Zuffa, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, all synonymous, were supposed to hand over as part of discovery. They failed to hand it over. And so the plaintiffs have been asking for this. They have not received it. They've filed motions with the judge. The judge ordered this hearing to find out what the hell happened to a lot of the spoilage. And one of the major spoilage issues is that Dana White's cell phone material, his communications for, I don't know what it is, like 5 years or some ridiculous amount of time, is missing. In addition to Dana White, Tracy Long, who works at the UFC, she's missing like 3.5 years of material. And so they called him in to find out what is happening. And Dana White, one thing we learned today is Dana White does not, and since, according to him, since 2017, does not engage in any fight negotiations, does not negotiate with fighters about their contracts, does not matchmake at all, and apparently also does not do business when he's traveling to China to witness UFC events. So that was all of his claims during this hearing today. Now, I don't know how accurate that fully is, because as the plaintiffs brought up, there are some negotiations that seem obvious that Dana White has conducted during that period. Namely, there's a Conor McGregor, I think it's a WhatsApp or I think Instagram communication that Conor McGregor made public that showed there's some communications. They also had a message from Jeremy Stevens. And Dana White said these are just, a few handful of cases. Tony Ferguson's another. But the more you add on a handful, that means there's more and more potentially negotiations he's been involved in. And so that's that's the question, I guess, is how convincing was Dana White that he is not in charge of anything anymore? And I think, there's 2 ways to look at this. One is Dana White is not being honest, that he is in charge of a lot more than he claims he is. The other possibility is perhaps Dana White is not running anything at the UFC. He's letting everybody else run it, and he is purely a figurehead. So I guess it's based on your opinion out there, what you think is the more accurate portrayal of Dana White. But it does seem, I don't know. I do believe it might be a mixture of the two, that Dana White is not as checked out as much as he used to be. That Dana White obviously has handed over a lot of responsibility to other people, but is it believable that he has no responsibility? That does not quite seem that believable to me. But Dana White, that was most of his testimony. I should note that the questions were very repetitive, and it seemed like Michael Delangelo, one of the attorneys who we did an interview with last year, about this case. One of the plaintiff's attorneys was the one questioning Dana White. I don't know how effective he was. It seemed more like he was doing a trial in front of a jury and trying to nitpick Dana White and basically get statements on every fact. And as Judge Boulware explained, I am familiar with the case. You do not need to go over all this material. So it seemed a lot of foot dragging on, at least from my view, that this is stuff that could have been much clearer. In fact, I'm not sure why he didn't specifically ask Dana White, do you know what happened to the lost years of material? You said you handed over to other people in the UFC, namely that Hunter Campbell gets it to copy material off for the attorneys. Well, Hunter Campbell constantly gets your phone to copy material off. Why wasn't Hunter Campbell aware that years are missing? Questions like that. I mean, I don't know what their strategy is, what the purpose is. Maybe there's a method of the madness, but things like I would imagine that would be an important question. I'm somewhat surprised they didn't ask that. Like, do you have any idea why you're missing years of material? Why, if you handed it to the attorneys, why they might have lost it, things like that. It was interesting, though, when Dana White was questioned by Colby, one of the attorneys from the defendant's side. Dana White brought up a reason why his most recent phone is missing. And that was a surprise because apparently the most recent phone was missing because they had a thief at Zuffa, TKO. And that thief was a relative of Ari Emanuel, according to Dana White. That thief, and that's who they found. I would have liked to question, though, about, how is this person who has the last name Emanuel, how they're related to Ari Emanuel? Are they being prosecuted? Questions like that. But also doesn't explain, like that explains why the last phone might be missing, but it doesn't explain why the previous years of messages are missing. So that was the Dana White questions. It was probably took a lot longer than it needed for Dana White. It was interesting to be there live, though, because you could see Dana White. One is, maybe he can't hear, but he brings that up a lot. So it's possible that Dana White really can't hear, or it's also possible that's a great strategy for Dana White to get people to restate the question or move on to another question because he can claim he can't hear. And so there's that. And then on top of that, Dana White also, looking through some of the questions. Yeah. So Dana White also brought up, that I'm trying to remember what he did bring up. Oh yeah, then later he got a little annoyed, I think, with Michael D'Angelo's questions. They seemed a little more pointed, that he's being kind of nitpicking about some. I shouldn't even say nitpicking. He's trying to pin him down on some of the lost material, and so I think Dana White got a little frustrated at that. But then we took a break. We came back. It was the attorney for the defendant's side chance to question Dana White. And lo and behold, and this is also, I'm somewhat surprised they didn't bring this up, is lo and behold, when Dana White was asked earlier if he had any idea why he might have perhaps lost his cell phone, and I should clarify this. Some people might be confused. There's a bunch of subjects here. Dana White's text message, emails, and stuff are missing for a period of time from, like, I believe it's 2000 and now I can't remember, 2019 to 2023 and a half, something like that. So several years. Let's see if I can find the actual dates here so I can give you guys an actual timeline, because I don't want to fuck this up. But as I'm looking for that, so that's one. There's a bunch of material in the past that's been lost that they're asking Dana White about. And the other thing is his most recent cell phone. I shouldn't say the cell phone that he's using. The previous cell phone has gone missing. And Dana White claimed that he had handed it over to Hunter Campbell to get the data or whatever. It was put in a secure place and then it disappeared. And so after Michael D'Angelo was done questioning him, and one of his questions, can you have any thoughts about why your phone might be missing? He didn't say anything, but later when they came out of break and it was the defendant's attorney asking questions, he brought up that there was a figure that was stealing from the company, Emanuel's relative, and that they possibly could have stole the cell phone. So, take that with you will. Is it possible that Dana White just remembered this because his attorney brought it up, or is it possible during the break someone reminded him for that answer? Who knows for sure. But that was the result of the break. The so that was Dana White's questioning. We had that for a while. Judge Bulwer, you could tell, was getting a little annoyed with the plaintiff's questioning. He thought it was, just too roundabout. Like, let's get to the point. We don't need to nitpick all this material. We just want to get to the gist of it and move on. But I thought, the more interesting actually was the second set of questions, which was with Tracy Long. And the Tracy Long one was interesting because, one is she didn't fall back as much into Dana White that he doesn't do anything anymore. And I should note before, the one thing at Dana White, it's possible he doesn't do anything anymore for the company, but it's also possible he's kind of put himself into a corner, because what happens if the plaintiffs can find someone, a fighter or a manager, that has communications with Dana White that include contract negotiations, that include fight negotiations, the things Dana White says he no longer does, right? So, there's large number of fighters out there. Did Dana White only, help negotiate a handful of fighters? Did he do it the way he said? His story is that sometimes fighters will reach out to him. He will discuss it briefly with them, but then he will pass it along to Hunter Campbell, Maynard, or Shelby to finish up the negotiations or continue on. And so if that's the case, then you can see what the defendants are trying to do. What the defendants are arguing is that Dana White's missing material is no longer really important to the case. It's not important to the case because Dana White doesn't negotiate deals anymore. So, well, let me spell this out if you're not fully familiar with the three cases. The reason why they need to know about the negotiations is there's a case called Misha v. Cirkunov. I'm sorry, Cirkunov v. Zuffa. And what that case is very identical to the current Johnson v. Zuffa antitrust case, but Cirkunov is representing fighters that sign these arbitration agreements and class action waivers. And part of and so the class action waivers prevent fighters from taking part in a class action. So if Johnson v. Zuffa has made a class action, a large number of fighters cannot participate in it. And so those fighters, if there's a settlement or damages, they don't get paid. And for the UFC, the threat is less because they don't have to worry about paying those fighters. And so the plaintiffs are challenging these class action waivers because they claim they break Nevada law, which says Nevada, there's a Federal Arbitration Act that gives the federal government basically has dictated these arbitrations are allowed, are enforceable in all states, that they supersede state courts except for limited reasons. And one of the limited reasons in Nevada is if you abuse monopsony power to force those contracts on people. So they want to look through the negotiation process to see if the fighters have been forced, that these contracts, these arbitration agreements, class action waivers have been forced onto fighters because of the monopsony power of the UFC. And so that's the reason they want this information. And so Dana White, of course, is claiming he knows nothing about it. There's nothing he can do about it. And so that's the defendant's argument, is that Dana White is a paper bag, a paper suit, an empty suit. Apparently the UFC doesn't negotiate anything. So the fact that he lost his material, lost this information is unimportant because he was not engaging in these type of negotiations. And so it should not impact the case. And it depends how you listen to the case. If you thought that seemed accurate on their part, if that believable by Dana White, but that's kind of what they're going for. And what the plaintiffs are trying to show is that that Dana White, yes, he does negotiate, and this missing material would be important to our case. And so the thing I'm saying is, in some ways, Dana White has put himself in a corner, because if there is no material out there, then he's fine. But if there is negotiations between him and a fighter and him and a manager from from 2017 until now, when he says he no longer did this. Well, that kind of demonstrates that Dana White is not being honest here, that he does in fact negotiate, and which could be detrimental to the UFC, the fact that they can't supply the rest of the messages. And so that's what the two sides are kind of, that's what the two sides story they're trying to pitch. And so the other person that was there today was Tracy Long. And Tracy Long is a longtime employee of the UFC. She has been she's in charge of she's in the legal department. I can't remember her current position title. She used to be a paralegal, but she's in charge of athlete compliance and stuff. And so everybody kind of agrees she doesn't negotiate per se contracts. She doesn't negotiate the contracts, but the plaintiffs find it important because when a contract is negotiated by a matchmaker, and there was some debate over is Hunter Campbell a matchmaker or not, is he legal? But if it's when a contract is negotiated, new contracts negotiated by Hunter Campbell or the two matchmakers in Shelby and Maynard, they often send the new details to her. And so the plaintiff's argument is that she has some knowledge of these negotiations. She takes some part in it. And the defendant's argument, of course, is that she does not take any part. They just send the new details over. You can find this information from the matchmakers. Now, what I thought was effective from the plaintiff's point of view today is they had Tracy Long up there, and they did point out that some of this material is missing. And I should note, Tracy Long apparently was unaware that she was subpoenaed in the case that was issued to the attorneys for her, that she has denied access to some of the material, uh, from Verizon and stuff, some of her personal material. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure how much. Maybe shouldn't read too much into that. Just be aware that she has not fully granted permission to have access to her material. But what was interesting today with the plaintiffs is they brought up communications between her and the matchmakers or promoter. Or let's say I think the one example they had was Malki Kawa from Front Row Management contacted her and they had a discussion, and she normally doesn't do these discussions, so she screen grabs the conversation and forwards it to Maynard or Campbell or whoever. And so what they pointed out is that she would have, we're missing large numbers of these screen grabs. That's one thing. Are they on your phone? We don't know. We need to search. No one seemed to be aware if they were or not. Also, that they showed a conversation between her and the matchmakers. The conversation cuts off, but on one of the screen grabs they show that apparently there's more of the conversation that was not included in the discovery process. And so the plaintiff's argument is that there could be a lot of material that covers the other members that we want discovery of, the other matchmakers that we don't have discovery of. This is some of the communications we would like to see that might be missing. And so, this is material we can't find anywhere else. So we need this material. So what happens if the defendants can't produce any of this material? That we have these missing communications for large segments, not just with Tracy Long and Dana White, but also potentially with select communications with Hunter Campbell, who might be a witness tomorrow, might have to testify tomorrow, with Maynard and Shelby. That's the plaintiff's argument, is that we cannot really make a case, the case that we need to make, without all this information. And one of the reasons Hunter Campbell has to testify today is because Dana White said that he preserved everything, and he just handed his phone over to Hunter Campbell whenever he was supposed to. And so Hunter Campbell's the one responsible if anything's missing. That's kind of the gist I had. The other thing is that there's a guy, Elliot Howard, that does everything for Dana White. That's, another thing. Not only does Dana White not matchmake, not only does Dana White not negotiate, not only does Dana White not do business when he's in China for a UFC event, but Dana White does not know how to set up his phone. Dana White does not know how to log in his password. So his password's set up to be on all the time on any app. Not only that, does Dana White not know how to delete material, not know how to save material, not know how to do anything. You know, this reminds me when I worked on a movie with Ann Nicole Smith. When I worked with Roger Corman in the '90s. I didn't really work in the movie. They did a movie with Ann Nicole Smith, who was not the brightest bulb in the business. We saw the dailies coming out of post, and they put an earpiece into her ear to feed her the lines because she couldn't remember them. And so when they put her on a car rig, which is to imitate you're driving a car, it's a flatbed. You put a fake car behind it so the camera can shoot. And they drove by LAX airport. Suddenly she started reciting the lines, "You are free to take off on Southeast, the Southeast, whatever, flight 727." She was, the traffic controller. We got the airport traffic light audio into her mic, and she was just repeating that, thinking that was the lines being fed to her. But how the Dana White reminds me of her is, she was notoriously dumb and she couldn't do anything. And then you start realizing that's kind of the genius of Ann Nicole Smith. She can't do anything, so she has no responsibility. Everybody else has to do everything for her. Everybody else has to read everything for her. Everybody else has to go get everything for her. Everybody else has to set everything up. So she doesn't have to do anything. And Dana White reminded me of that today because he apparently doesn't have to do anything. And so that was, the Dana White experience. You know, I mean, I don't know how truthful it is that he doesn't do anything, but that was the image Dana White was trying to present. I mean, he did say I have all these other responsibilities, but I would be nice if someone would ask you, what do you actually do if you don't do any of this other shit that people assume that people in the fight business does? So, so it'll be interesting tomorrow because they're now going to call in this Elliot Howard that sets up Dana White's phone for him. Who sounds like in some ways was thrown under the bus that if anything's missing, it's his fault. And they're going to ask him about, he's supposed to come in and testify, as well as Hunter Campbell has to testify tomorrow because again, Dana White said on regular intervals, he handed over his phone to Hunter Campbell. Hunter Campbell got whatever material he needed to preserve it for the case, and then they give it back to Dana White, and then eventually Dana White would get a new phone, and that phone would be put in a safe spot at the company. And so I kind of wish the plaintiff's attorneys would have asked him, or so if that's the case, do you have any theories about how all this material is missing? But maybe they're saving that for tomorrow's questions. But to get why this is important now, again, as I pointed out, what the defendants are trying to point out is that there's no malicious intent, right? That this was not intentional. For some reason, some of this material is missing, and some of the attorneys did seem generally confused about why stuff is missing. So they want to point out there's none of this is malicious. And that also that Dana White and the material missing really plays no part in negotiations, so we don't have to worry about this. And so it's not that big a deal for the case. Why the plaintiff side, the fighter side, what they're trying to argue is that, that was part of the boring stuff they went over again and again, saying, "Were you aware? Did you sign?" They even played testimony, depositions, Dana White's depositions video of Dana White being read. Describing, his responsibility to preserve material. They showed his signature on a document that says, "I will preserve all material." So they want to show that even if it wasn't intentional, you had a responsibility. You were informed multiple times. You were well aware that you had to preserve the stuff. You had to do stuff to preserve this. And so either you did not do your responsibility, you did not do your due diligence, you set up your phone or whatever to delete stuff every 90 days, or your attorneys failed it. So that's the two sides. So why is this important for the case? Well, the importance is if the judge decides that this material is really relevant to the case, that there is material in there that's important. I mean, not just a small amount, but a large amount that's very important that would demonstrate the UFC's business workings. And it's missing. Well, then how do you run how do you run a case? I mean, how does the plaintiffs make their case? How does the judge make determination? How does the jury? And so there's something called adverse inference, which it's a jury instruction. There's something similar the judge could do. So since this evidence could apply to all the cases, Circanoff v. Zuppa, Davis v. Zuppa, Johnson v. Zuppa, it could have large repercussions for the UFC, because let's go to Circanoff. Now, that's not going to be a trial. That's an order. That's the judge has to make a determination about these arbitration agreements. And so we get to that point down the line, if he determines that it's a class, that all the fighters are represented by this, and he has to make a decision on these arbitration class action waivers, he could basically say, I can't, I have to decide with the defendants, because not the defendants, sorry, I have to decide with the plaintiffs, because the material that could possibly either prove the plaintiff's case or prove the defendant's case is missing. And because it's missing because of gross negligence or malicious intent by the defendants, I am forced to, through adverse inference, to determine that I have to weigh it on the side of the plaintiffs. In that case, I have to throw out these arbitration agreements and class action waivers under Nevada law. And so all the fighters, which is a large number of fighters, over half the roster, half the people that potentially in the Johnson class have signed this, they are now back in the Johnson class. And now it's no longer a small group of fighters. It's a very large group of fighters are part of the Johnson class. And you can see the problem with that. And then we move on to the next case. And the next case is Davis. Now, Davis has some standing issues, but let's say Phil Davis remains on the case with the standing, that we get to that case. Well, that case is not going to be determined by a jury. That case is a bench trial. The judge will hear the case. So again, we get that same problem where they both make their arguments, and the judge is like, I have to weigh this evidence in favor of the plaintiffs because it's missing. And so anytime I have to make a judgment that's the best possible scenario for the plaintiffs, I have to do that. And every time I have to make a judgment in the worst possible scenario for the defendants, I have to do that. In that case, I have to determine that there is monopoly power by the UFC and rule in front of Davis, and possibly grant injunctive relief. And so that's a massive problem for the UFC. And then finally, you get to the Johnson v. Zuffa case, which now, if you ruled in favor of the Circanoff arbitration agreement, would have more fighters and potentially more damages. If it goes to trial, he has to turn to the trial and say, because this material is missing, I think you should have an adverse inference, that you, the jury, are free to interpret any time that there's an argument based on material that we do not have available. You can weigh it that it's the most adverse to the defendants and most beneficial to the plaintiffs. And that's pretty goddamn scary, right? That's pretty scary if you're the UFC defendant to go into trial on that. So that's potentially, now let's not get ahead. That's potentially how bad it could get. And that's why this is so important. So we will have to wait, I think, until tomorrow to see what else comes out in the case. There's again, like I said, there's a lot of questions I wished were asked. There's a lot of stuff. There was some smart stuff. You're sitting in the back, and because I'm immersed in the fight business, because I follow this, there's things like, well, I'm surprised they didn't ask this. But they did bring up one thing kind of surprising and I thought was interesting. Dana White says he never talks business with text messages, really. That's not something he does. He lets the other people do that. They did point out that, have you ever talked to Kevin Iola about business? And he couldn't remember that. Like, I think what they're pointing out there is interviews you've done with Iola, or at least communications, where you've fed Iola exact numbers from the UFC because you wanted to have them. And that shows that what other communications, that's evidence communications we know you had, because we have the end result. You fed this to Kevin Iole, and he gave the exact purses, the exact payouts, the exact pay-per-views for events. But what other communications are now missing? Because we know that sometimes you give people exact information, because we have it with the Kevin Iole case situation, but in other situations, we don't know because the material is missing. So there's that as well. So after, a long day, long, fucking long, it's a long trial, and I got paid nothing like the attorneys. Let's put it that way. It's done. I will say the one interesting part, if you were listening in, all the people that were remotely, you missed the best part, is when Dana White started calling Judge Bulwer Little Ricky, and Bulwer got upset and said, "You glued my locker shut." That, of course, is, I'm fucking kidding. So if anybody takes that serious, you're an idiot. But that's what I was expecting, and that was what I was hoping for, some fireworks, that there was some classroom fireworks. But there was pure professionalism in the court today, except for the freaking long, drawn out process of questioning. And hopefully tomorrow is a little more exciting for live viewership. But in retrospect, when you start piecing together the questions and answers, it is a little more entertaining than actually being there. So hopefully people found this somewhat informative. I will do a live feed tomorrow, I am sure, either in the middle of the day or at the end of the day after the hearing. I don't know if they're going to go any additional days after that. I'm not sure I can make it. But tomorrow we should have some more Dana White testimony, I think. I think they're going to call Dana White again. They didn't make that clear. They're talking about it. We should have some Hunter Campbell, who apparently runs everything now. He's the guy that does everything, according to Dana White. And also this Elliot Howard figure, or Howard Elliott. I'm not sure what his name is, but he is the secret of the whole thing. So I hope he's aware that he's being called up. So I will let you guys on that note go. I am going to go and get something to eat. I'm freaking hungry, and I will talk to everybody tomorrow.